Except for judging here.
Yeah.
Shad says he good. He good. Just cut the stream off.
Good.
Is anybody not ready? Who gave you power? All that is determined is by authorities who purport themselves as sovereign through divine legitimacy. So, who gave you power? Wasn't it your ability to be? Wasn't it your ability to condemn us to nothing? This is time to destroy it. Depend on for your world to survive, for your divine to divide. Well, whiteness will always will the ability to be divine. At least that's how y'all survive. So, who gave you power? Sources and rules are truly law only for community recognized as authoritative. You're divine. Your coercion of the community to concede to your law, your power. The ability to examine, execute, and exercise this executive divine that is truly the work of white perks, but that shit don't hurt. It is time to build a new world, a project, born not out of fear or hatred, but out of and grounded in love. And when your world loses the energy it used to get from niggas, when your world crumbles under the weight of ours, when you take that last breath, don't expect anything good, cause rich people do not go to heaven and white people do not go to heaven. When whiteness is understood as comfort, privilege, and wealth, renounce your whiteness. Not because it will save your soul, but because you owe all the heaven you created here. Renounce your whiteness means giving away the wealth, financial, social, and cultural capital that comes with whiteness. Blackness carries with it both the power and the responsibility over and to this world. Power and responsibility. Now that's real authority. Our understanding of the Most High will inevitably be different from yours because the Most High is on this side, yes. Our God is black. God is located among those who are systemically denigrated. It seems odd that I have to look to create something new to take back what you took, that out of so much hate was born so much love, that I must affirm myself through interconnectedness, but tradition without paradox is empty and paradox without tradition is blind. So, who gave you power? After constantly being condemned to the category of nothing, the various sounds you hear are a yes to life and a no to the conditions of living that y'all put us through. These sounds exceed your expectation of our labor and plea. Put differently, choreosonicity. This excess was hallucinating of another life, another zone of inhabitation upon which to perform intellectual practice. Choreosonic vibration broke while giving form, otherwise form. Are you listening? Can you feel it? The vocable, the rhythm, both resonant, both vibratory, the sound of the drums, the sound of the voice, the sound of the flesh, carries and speaks the condition of life that rises to the occasion of brutal bonds of violation. So, who gave you power? In a world where the West can theorize about our bodies, we forefront choreosonics as a form of black study that acts as a necessary disruption to the epistemology that produces a world wherein black flesh cannot breathe. Blackness is released into the world to disrupt the institutionalization and abstraction of thought that produces the categorical distinction of disciplinary knowledge. So, who gave you power? Y'all can try to map out our blackness, but try to capture this music. You can't, because disciplinary knowledge is set to resolve knowledge to objectivity, but we engage in otherwise possibilities with regard to the production of knowledge, a production predicated on the performance of resistance, a resistance that precedes what exists before any encounter. There is a vibration, a sonic event, a sound, given the withheld from view. It cannot be stilled absolutely. Try to capture this, try to objectify this. No, not just the music, but every otherwise possibility, a resource that is never exhausted. The production and performance of black choreosonics is a rejection of black life, black Numa, Crawley 17. The performance of plural possibilities as a critique of violent modernity is not about human possibility, but the possibilities that exist in plurality, that have been rejected from the zone of the human, what is held and given away. The aesthetic of the black Numa, the aesthetic to enunciate life that is exorbitant, though engulfed by brutal violence. Otherwise, black life exceeds the very capacities of seemingly gratuitous violence. It will yield robust analyses of liberal concepts of subjectivity and of the body.
So actually, since I don't consider myself as one of the humanists, I'm a spiritual being myself. I'm sure I can contribute more than the hearts to any kind of person, because they're all here today and gone tomorrow anyway. And you might say that no man is contributing anything to anything. He doesn't stay here very long, you know, and then he's headed out somewhere else where he has no power. I feel if the men on this planet would be honest with themselves, they would see that they have no power whatsoever. To get involved in a particular situation of a time zone, a generation, a country, any sort of thing that would make a man think that he is, you might say, God, the kind that has absolute authority, is fooling oneself. I know myself would never want to be God or even like God, because God got all these human beings on this planet, and I most certainly wouldn't want to be responsible for it, or even have the disgrace that I made them.
We'll let the music speak for itself.
Oh my, I'm feeling high. My money's gone, I'm all alone. Too much to see, the world keeps turning. Oh, what a day, what a day, what a day. Peace and blessings manifest with every lesson learned. If your knowledge were your wealth, then it would be well earned. If we were made in His image, then call us by our names. Most intellects do not believe in God, but they fear us just the same.
This is Conan 72, the music of black people or other black experience the United States and tell what black people did to keep together and endure. It is one thing to know that you're a human being and quite another to create a world. Blacks created a separate world for themselves, a world defined by justice and peace. We sing when we protest for our rights and when the formal achievement of them makes no difference to the quality of our life.
On and on and on and on. I was born underwater with $3.06. Yeah, you may laugh because you did not do your math. Like 1, 2, 3. Like 1, 2, 3. The world keeps turning. Oh, what a day, what a day, what a day. The man that knows something knows that he knows nothing at all. Does it seem colder in your stomach, hotter in your fall? If we were made in His image, then call us by our names. Most intellects do not believe in God, but they fear us just the same.
Whatever form black music takes, it is always an expression of black life. The fact that black people keep making music means that we as the people refuse to be destroyed. The last word belongs to us and music is our way of saying it. Otherwise, possibilities exist and the register of imagination has to be altered in order to get at what's there.
I am feeling kinda hungry, cause my eye is coming down. Don't feed me yours, because your food does not endure. I think I need a cup of tea. The world keeps burning. Oh, what a day. What a day, what a day, yeah. You rush into destruction cause you don't have nothing left. The mothership can't save you, so your ass is gon' get left. If we were made in His image, then call us by our names. Most intellects do not believe in God, but they fear us just the same. Oh, on and on and on. I go on and on and on.
Y'all good? Cool. So my first question has to do with a description during the top half of the affirmative as a performance of resistance. What is the difference between a performance of resistance and resistance proper?
We think that a performance of resistance is one that is done for the self, right? I don't think that, I think resistance writ
What
large
is the
is one that is
self?
always in opposite
Yeah.
to the structure. I think
So
that
I think that kind of question misunderstands the way that the YAC theorizes or understands resistance. Our argument is that there is a resistance that precedes the necessity for rationalizing ourselves.
Right, there are different forms of production, right? One that you can produce for others and one that you can produce for yourself.
Sure, so I guess that brings me back to my top level. Clearly there's a distinction between the performance of resistance and simply just
And I think
resistance,
that
or
I've
is there
already
not?
answered and created the distinction between the two.
What is that distinction? That's, yeah.
One that is done for oneself and one that is done for
Okay,
others.
so what is the human? What is the human?
We think that the human...
No, your first piece of evidence describes black music as that which escapes the confines of human possibility. What is the human?
Right, we think that the human is sort of the human is sort of the being that creates sort of the structuring of society, right? One that creates a call to order in a civilization.
Why is escaping that bad? Or why is escaping that good, maybe?
I think that our argument is that when, so I think that your question is sort of pointed towards our notion of otherwise possibility, and I think that I would explain otherwise possibilities with an example of, when in interaction with a cop, that moment where you hold your breath, you think about all these otherwise possibilities in the world, right? We think that that is one that is uniquely sort of, we think that that is one
so
that
is the affirmative's conception of resistance, which is described as like that sort of escaping the world, the same as that which comes when you hold your breath near a cup?
I think that theorization, like literally Ryan's answer, like is not about that theorization. Our argument is not one about escape, right? Our argument is rather one about the ability to affirm oneself in face of that violence.
That brings me back to the second question. What is the self?
Huh?
What is the self?
It's not about the self. Our argument is about being able to affirm the relationship that one has in and of themselves to black.
Another portion of the top says that rules are only law if the community recognizes them as such. Why is that true?
Our argument is that structures only have power insofar as people can invest their faith in it, right? We think that the money sees divestment from that.
What does it mean to invest one's faith in a structure?
Is what reduces power.
How does one invest one's faith in a structure?
We think that by legitimizing, validating, giving sort of power to structures, right?
What is power?
We think power is the ability to create to enact something onto somebody else, right? Like that, and that something is not only a rule or a law, but rather can be their own opinion, their own, like, sort of to infiltrate one person's being.
To infiltrate one person's being. What is being?
Being is, I think, the literal notion of like being alive, right?
A notion of like existence, however you choose to theorize.
The order will be one off and then case. It should have been sent already. Maybe you pass my computer.
Yeah. What?
What's up with this thing?
Oh, it's busted, that's why.
Okay. Help. Anyone know how to get table tilts to work?
Yeah. No.
Just do this.
Oh my god.
Huberless Marxism to the same.
Wow, giving away what we're going to read. Nobody ever would have expected Marxism.
I'm dead.
That's my shit.
You don't got my cough drops? Cough drops.
Oh,
Yeah, I got it.
Drop of the cup.
I brought my bag in here. No, I don't see it.
Thank you.
Do y'all have it?
Yeah.
Where did I put that? Okay. The only question of this debate is whether the affirmative RSA strategy to challenge capitalism and the political ontology of anti-blackness is locked in place through the alienation of black labor and abstraction of the form of capital, raising anti-blackness to an ontological level, ignores the contingency of capital risk at its rhythm RNT. The black form is always already subsumed with the marching form of the capital of the victim, subject to the reason ontological scanners repeat each instance of alienated black labor, temporal black function, the commodity form, and equal presupposition, the addition, the domination, and predicate the abstract implicated black body to his currency towards the ontological scanner person behind the black body's individual as currency with the modern financial system. The change of the black stuff is always done informed by the logic of underweight and speculative with the creative based of black beings or the contaminated of labor-based capital accumulation, financial domination, not merely a cycle but a transaction of insurance with the instant body that written speculative risk of capital, not like black down beings already owned by ontology, problem by bios that compliance to the broader liquidity and regime of prototypical capital extension which is symptomatic of the larger logic of social quantification in the terms of capital apart from the body that are no longer but the actual slave. The financial game was good as the body became a black white once it was assumed within capital risk and the aesthetic resistance coupled dangerously with the static interpretation of blackness to enable tokenization. They become the resilient black stuff to stand up for their communities that always position the absent antagonistic those who fail to represent in the ways that drain surplus for the representational economy. This is Neon going 14. To represent can mean to depict, but it can also mean to speak for. So their perspective was the equation of speaking forward, depicting that light, all the ideology to operate in visual statement is that the other rulers, a space of intervention, the true representation, how grab with them, a dedicated with lines, their hands and pull out, stick with each other, and enables possibilities. This space will be foreclosed if we understand political representation of bourgeois democratic socialist politicians are elected as representation. This role has funnel black artists, the consequence of racism, black artists are publicly visible, their work is burned because they are accountable to the communities and the political economy of racial representation. The visibility of a few black public figures to reproduce the invisibility and lack of access to the discourse until the community, the whole structure based on bourgeois capabilities. I know police black artistic expression with different representation, unpredictable representation, not being spoken, or a post-racial, post-racialism is united and between speaking for speaking as somebody representation rather be a strategy of subverting the organized mechanism in which community capitalism reproduces invisibility through the guise of empowerment and the absence, the universal in favor of local and fragmented knowledge, which is proven and cross-sect. This surrenders the ability to define the future to neoliberal hegemony. The universal is not inherently impressive, but it will be under unfettered capitalism. This Hester in 17. A growing emphasis on fragmentation and single-issue politics is avoiding totalizing the structural mass of capital, the difference in scope of the and what is opposed to the strategy being used to oppose the gender, the disempowerment, capitalist power, is the fourth then break the shouting in the hundred of these, a series of a local fragment of partial force that are also the only available criticism being created behavior to present intensity of present application, and taking our services to be studying political studying to catch the expert hegemonic poverty, neoliberal capitalism, the kind of studying abstract anxiety, and no regards to politics, the renewed abstract ambitions, future ornaments, and can make stuff out as acceleration because the ability in intellectual and start capable of creating a new ideology, economic, social models, and not extended advances, reenactment of visionary process, and their call towards embodiment, demonize the abstract in the space of theoretic favor, locking the political imagination to the here and now. All reasons why disembodiment are bad are also reasons why the alternative claims it from finance capital. This read in 14. Abstraction is big has to get head by abstract parts of the value study permeate our everyday life to pure. Henceforth, to not abstraction of love rules to not the necessary role play, but abstraction and shaping people have new modes of examining and abstraction also not the possibility of affording to collective by without any means of anything receptible to be reduced to the county population but then again calculate experience the abstraction must face the individual economy wants to logical position to study now alternative poles if you draw out the chaining up to do for abstraction with you the duty that draws on the only way from the abstraction is separation one had to go towards a dedicated from what is towards what could be it is after me and advance the acting as a condition moving towards the abstraction new connectivity to one of the abstraction and to go to read by isolation to get back to be and needs to be reclaimed by colonization and avoiding institution building advocates the potential for communal power produces revolution through static bursts of energy which fail. This is assurance taking away 15. What should the future look like? What's up, of the writings that race of the future, co-opting the surely almost a vision, hence why ever since philosophies. Now, so that we have to read the idea and the ideology of the future, cycle of political sentiments, except the common sense, the radicals, just come over the majority of it. I think I wrote into the future, we've already been seated to call, until truly right. I think the product could impact the culture, and not the decline of belief in men and their person of the broader, to determine those to offer without progress not bound to be. Still, European pathway to the right, political and the cultural constellations, the new future and the future, and to establish and transform political part of the absent image of progress, there will only be active defense valves, local resistance, and a bunker mentality. I think progress must show hyperstationally, had the temple form will have been some hyperstationed or kind of form orienting narratives to which to navigate forwards, progress, the matter of political struggle, and neoliberal capitalism produces significant steep as system of reproduces crises that depoliticizes the on my future thought on postpones my impacts, hard battle collapse, and is one of the rights of fashion and severe on 15. We cannot hope to progress by feeling some random across the world. The master tools, the only available global and environmental solutions that know who undermine model life, all this model life, precarity, the world today, care by polarization, unemployment, and the anti-search are therefore new market capital accumulation, because of exploitation, expropriation, the subjection of all aspect of life, to the discipline, the market, the work on a global scale, a bit of unrealized financial, environmental, social crises become chronic, live in a state of perpetual conflict and crisis are deferred after death, maybe banks to battle, but led to unrule the practice that led to the practice that led to the break channel first phase, the guarantee to rule the Christ, then for the skill greater down the road, these crises is helped to renew the war create abandonment, create destruction, to serve the opposite, create by the future exists only be colonized. Hey, market to be the future and made to function consider possibility, but any alternative. Thus, the alternative is to affirm the model of the Communist Party. Only party can provide effective accountability mechanism to correct showing tendencies, educate, mobilize, marginalize communities, connect to international social to movement for international liberation. This is Escalon 1018. Base building a dual power strategy, best forward to the party, organizing other movements, socializing power, revolution, social intended by building, including making rules to be, hey, to demonstrate economics, get off relief from capitalism, in order to build the base, we have to have already done the work of building economies, part of the members of forming a party line turned by the democratic essentials, this is the holding party members accountable by action for educating, and they empower community, and to keep organized communities fight for the liberation party, organized, organized, and to have accountable laws, those creates and function with the unit, they work in the shadow, strategy, help correct open tenants, accountable is crucial, and appears that the only effective levels to organize, conform, procedural, also direct access to the palms organization, also without party, most along the recruitment, education, and common in practice at this time, and the party card capable of defending against each of the state, the party, more the musical, home method of arching these things, the unified national party will be the long-term goal. Case. Our interpretation of the first natural from an export method exemplifies the resolution. There's net benefit to the status quo, an alternative option. The negative has the who we decide the method outweighs the benefit to the favor of the status quo, presenting net benefit and mutually exclusive alternative method. This means you won't even destroy if by the choice of the app is only good for people in this room or inside debate. This is the best model for debate. It's the point of method tested good and cause that benefit analysis produces both the depth and breadth. It solves the intellectual myopia where we only look at aspects of experience we want to look at. And second, that checks ask if I not be able to negate means the app always wins. Third is academic contestation. It's pro-black, the black radical tradition founded upon important disagreements that develop between important theoretic historical lessons for black people to draw upon as pro-black action. Patricia Hill Collins versus Horse and Spillers. These figures not have the same take on black tradition but seek to advance black feminism. Nonetheless, force that non-explodable cause psychological violence, force ground to be about the performance results in ad hominem attacks against people for the sake of the battlefield. If they shift to our interpretation is kiddish shifting absences and solve the rate which kill education argument and development be impossible to be negative. And there's an affect here. Affect-based practices, academic embellishment, and its place of structural analysis, choreosonics, the political vacuum, in which any and all neoliberal politics can flourish only be affirmative comments from horizon and garden and practice to change the horizon and political possibility to do something better. This Vitosky and Levin. Affect is being used to say social contract in relation to the establishment of conflict, that equated with the most experienced by us, but the economics are celebration of affect, the social and clear and passive integration, and an affect followed by the kind of human stuff else being held with the theoretical and political opening more units to affect and the prompts of greater, and the attempt to translate the element of life we must be subject to the permacultural theory of relation, to the impact subject of getting the heart of social production, most affects that go get through with stability, non-ethical, alkali of self with the agenda of showing a limit to affect progressive policies despite the fact there's not any certainty what for, and go from affect by taking a number of affect, 7 belts, affect, this sense of scholarly figure, and there's a God, the abstraction of God is a theological non-body part of the black theological tradition, and as they like to see the tied to Christianity and enable, that entails the disavowal of black women and trans people, Lisbon 15. The assumption of an axiomatic link between religion and blackness limits and centralized blackness, the imposition of non-black enough on those who identify as atheists by moving beyond Christianity, hegemonic tenets to the limiting authentic blackness, are refused by theoretical language. I believe the tribal doctrine and that the women and Gen Z people would have been used to validate all black people, Christianity, serve the sake of Canada, and for unequal power relations, all the same black, like a radical tradition, feminist vocabulary, as being my subjectivity and subjectivity, and non-body, that's not fully and honesty, and logical language, black theology, theological service, not the body is the body, theological nobody. We can divide the human and the structure of the being in the world. We can divide the theology, act our embodiment of the core subjectivity, Christian, and theology of rejection of aesthetic factor, and go with feminism, always being entrenched rather than theological structure, instead of the living value of the embodied experience. And there's an affect, there are affective investment in the and in some sentimental public sphere like debate, lubricate the wheels of liberalism, mobilizing fantasies of collective desire to undergird neoliberal regimes of governance and prolonged today. The therapeutic intensity of sentimentality, but needs to be told as promise of aesthetic recognition, redemption, who's against its own award, subject copies of portfolio belongs to in my public surprise, intent and authentic salvation, include the pathological public sphere. Of the United States, they're trying to stand on a radical moment of social anxiety, completely generic, which for armed politics of Rome, such was not emotions, I've been only the cause. I said, I'm a mobile floating a fantasy of a scene of collective Darwin, every day the political sentimental seeks out emotional recognition, and it can change in the action realm, pulse action, where age of the orchestra, and hold the real accountable affect of justice, has for true sentimental target, the emotional cost of it, on the material, what the personal impact, and not changing. I get hit the representative, where step in instruction, and test like sentimental ways, modes of testimony, witness the world, how to get a system with the genre, have the same effect of feminism, and performance fails to trust resistance at the individual level, sees powerless fail to recognition. This locks in a universalized noble somebody this time, the movement's independently performative affect is inaccessible to black disabled people, which may exclude people from the community movements they create. These Mohammed 15. The aestheticization of present failure to just equality of service, these essentially efforts may be default to try and radical, individual, which will compel people to challenge the individual, the same mutual opposed to hyper individuals, and consumer oriented adaptations of their surveillance, supremacy, one accommodating surveillance, recognition of application of surveillance, practice, and the present universal subjects for the control of the the right to hide it, excellency, demand for large population. Mark for populations.
So you marked Leon at populations,
yeah,
and you didn't read the Haven evidence?
What was that?
You didn't read the Haven evidence?
I marked Mohan. I did not read the Manon evidence or the Haven evidence.
Give me a song.
What was that?
I said give me a song.
Oh, yeah, take it.
Just living, man.
Are y'all looking for the line?
Yeah.
The last set of highlighted text in the card, top, first line of it.
Oh, no.
Cool.
I was looking for the end of the sentence. Alright.
You good?
How do you have a party without music?
Different type of party.
What?
Different type of party?
Not our
How do you have a party without music?
Hashtag not our
How do
party.
you answer a question with a question?
I didn't answer a question with a question. I said
answered a question with an answer. It's not
Wait,
our
wait,
party.
wait, but still, like, why doesn't your party have music?
Our argument is that the theorization of resistance as a form of performativity, which we
That sounds like a lot, and it doesn't include music. So
Well,
I'm confused.
I
why.
think-
we are impact turning music. Put that in your 2AC.
I think that there's a distinction
That sounds like a
between
born party.
the way that you've
I guess,
injected
why
music
does
into
the
a
1AC
performance
defend
space.
ontology?
Huh?
Why does the 1AC defend ontology?
We don't say that you defend ontology. We're making a counter-ontological argument about the way finance.
How do you
How do you make a
counter-
counter-ontological claim to something that wasn't ontological in
We
the first
didn't say that you made an ontological claim. We're making one.
Oh, so
So you're placing ontology onto us.
No, we're saying that we're making an ontological claim about the way financialization produces anti-black violence.
Wait,
We're
I'm
not saying that
confused.
you're making
I'm
ontological
confused.
claim.
The
We're
link is
making
about having an ontological and
Oh,
static
it's not a link.
interpretation
It's
of
not
black.
a link.
It's not a link. It's a theorization of our understanding
Cool.
of
Not a link.
anti-blackness.
What's the reason why the affirmative is bad?
We think we have a few of them. We think that there's the arguments within the Nyong'o evidence, I think, about the way that there's a representational economy that you have injected both the performance of the 1AC and the strategy into. That's the first link. We think that produces resilient subjects.
What do you mean
with
performance?
attachments. Huh?
What do you mean performance?
We think that the 1AC was a modality whereby you injected a strategy into a debate round where there is an audience that then consumes it, recognizes it, has to cast judgments upon it.
Why isn't the alternative the same thing?
Everything is a performance. It's a question of how we identify with that
So then
performance.
why is
You're
our performance
hyper-identified with the performative aspects of this space and of other
Also,
political
our music
spaces.
is too much.
No.
No.
We're impact turning the strategy that you have proposed as sonics in this space.
Clearly you've just impact turned form and made an argument that says that doing it in front of an audience is bad.
No,
I'm
our
confused.
argument is that the fixation on form as a medium of resistance.
Okay, so I'm
is
confused.
performance of resistance
I'm confused.
feedback.
Would choreosonics in my bedroom alone be fine?
What?
Would choreosonics in my bedroom alone be fine?
Our argument is a question of how choreosonics should be figured as a function of political strategy. We're saying that
So choreosonics is bad political strategy.
Yes.
That's okay. Cool.
I think this is part of our argument about the burden of rejoinder, which is that if it's some strategy that is just for you as a person and you can do it alone in
It
your
was
room,
an example. Who said it was for us?
you just said if you do it alone in your room. That's our
I guess-
argument. Is that if
Also
that's
process
Great.
If
I
the
guess
app
what is
collapses down to
embodiment?
that-
What is embodiment?
embodiment, we think, is the process by which we theorize from the sort of experiential and phenomenological performances.
So what
of
part?
this.
What part of the 1AC theorized from the experience?
You actually do say at the very top that the best form of epistemology is one that refuses institutionalization and abstraction of thought. We are saying that both institutionalizing and abstracting thought is good.
In
Okay.
fact, the read evidence is hyper specific to the language of abstraction.
This one.
10 minutes. How does the party resolve neoliberal violence that has already happened?
So it depends on what you consider to be neoliberal violence that's already happened. We
People that have died as a result of the structure of capitalism that you claim kills so many black people?
obviously can't resurrect people, but our argument is that the party is the precondition for producing a world in which that does not continue.
Cool. When do we reach that world?
What?
When do we reach that world?
By 2050, our Shaviro evidence says that capitalism will collapse as a result of the rate of profit declining. It will be replaced by either fascism or communism. If the left gets its shit together, it will be replaced by communism. If it doesn't, it will be replaced by fascism.
He's talking shit. 8:47. Did we lose anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Bye bye.
It's been a long weekend. It just be like that sometimes.
Here you go. This is.
We got this.
No, sure don't.
Oh.
Sure don't.
Are there cards?
Nope. All right. Everybody good?
What's the order?
Oh, case. Yeah.
Cool.
Oops. So. All right. Good. Everyone, you good? All right. For our niggas and our niggas some more, the affirmative defense of choreosonics is one that gives us the ability to create relation with the niggas around us, the ones we see every day and the ones that have an impact on our lives here and beyond. You have conceded that choreosonics as a vessel is possible for creating relationships with certain individuals, which is key for the representations of black people to see themselves outside of just being objects of violence, but rather as relative beings with other people. This is particularly important for how we plan solutions for how we plan mechanisms to deal with the violence that we face. But our argument is that sitting and recognizing that the beginning of our relationship to dealing with what we deal with every day is not to understand ourselves solely through the ways that the violence is enacted upon our bodies, but rather to understand how the people around us influence the way we navigate those things. The affirmative creation of otherwise possibilities is the only mechanism for us to be able to go on and on identified in this debate. They have arguments about the ability to resist structural violence in and of itself, but our argument is that structural violence does not come down to the level of experience because individuals still internalize the fact they only have to be bodies oriented towards that violence. Next is the problem solution binary. Their orientation towards resolving material instances of violence is only a mechanism to force individuals to have to produce solutions to problems that only become more problems in an infinite cycle. Your necessitation of black productivity saps energy and makes black life impossible. This is what Sun Ra means when he says that we don't want to be God. Third is community mobilization. You've conceded the code evidence, which says that even when we do not solve things, the music of black people is good because it caused the community to come together under a frame of social agency, because it is always an expression of black life that gives us the last word. I think this is a great place to make tension between the affirmative and their theorization of how black people should be. First off is that the fact that you can theorize the way that black people ought to orient themselves to the world is a disadd to your performance in and of itself. It fundamentally makes black life contingent on your theory of power. Big mistake identifying it as an as the only ontolization in this round, because it means that the only way individuals understand blackness is through the lens of y'all. The case terms you have proper. We'll start with the God DA. This is a ridiculous argument. Conceding the Sun Ra portion means that even if your argument is that the status quo ties God, is that the status quo black liberation theology ties God to the nobody. Our argument is that black people do not encompass that and do not internalize that as the navigation strategy. It also doesn't have an impact. Their argument about affect says that choreosonics leaves us in a political vacuum. We've made an argument about why taking that step back is good. That impact turns that and says that even if that is the trade-off, creating relationality with our niggas is good because it is the only way that we will be able to survive. They don't have a counter mechanism to this. Their last argument, the law evidence says that it's about sentimentalism that keeps liberal structures intact. A subpoint in this argument is about having particular attachments to those things and engaging in those processes in order to escape those. Our argument is that we don't have an attachment to those worlds. You have conceded it's the only mechanism for individuals to be able to create worlds for themselves that are not defined by our relationship to this world. If anything, your theorization of capitalism is the only thing that is attached to the way that violence is produced in this world. Their last argument is that we cannot engage with black disabled folks because we cannot engage with black disabled folks because of the way that we exist on an individual level. Concession of the code evidence means that it's not only individual, but there are also registers that individuals engage with in order to produce those things. Also, if that is true, only that means that navigating those things is possible for that. Lastly, this flattens the way that the 1AC works only in relationship to music and not in relation to vibrations. Misunderstanding that particular portion of the affirmative then means that accessibility flows affirmative, and is a reason as to why our kind of method of exporting the way that we engage that is net better than your theorization of capitalism. The interpretation argument is proper. At some point, your argument is about engaging in exportability, but it assumes exportability is only a question of localities and not a question of people. We think that we are exporting our method to other bodies. Your argument is that the only real offense they have is that it keeps things trapped in intellectual myopia. But this is only a question of their method testing argument. We still think that you can test the method of choreosonics and indicate that it is violent in particular localities and spaces. Even if that is true, you've conceded that it's exportable. Here's a great warrant. This is great for the niggas in my hood that throw block parties every week in order to be able to understand their neighbors better and create relationships and frameworks that literally keep them safe. Your argument is that it causes the psychological violence, but assuming that we are not exportable only because we choose to talk to other niggas or because we choose to relate the 1AC to other niggas theorizes exportability in a manner that is fucked up to black people. They don't have a reason as to why they could not engage with this, so that's why they could not engage with this base in this way. Lastly, they can also read, if this is true, they can also read reasons why, like, at us being local, if we do that, doesn't outweigh exportability, so that doesn't matter. The critique. Their theorization is the starting point of their theorization to the starting point of violence has already been impact target. You should cross-apply that work that I did on the case. Cross-apply the work that I did on the case debate. Their argument is that we misunderstand the way that financialization works. Our argument is that financialization only exists as a product of forcing individuals to engage in kind of frames of labor. This is a reason why the party will never be able to resolve things, and all of your impacts are not unique. It fundamentally requires individuals to fall in line with a particular order, because that's the way that political organizing works. Note that the evidence is all about mechanisms of political organizing. Second, your mechanism of understanding political organizing misunderstands the way that certain niggas use, or certain niggas organize differently. We have already created a party with the niggas that are in this room, with the niggas that are in this room before you even showed up. If you were a part of that organizing process, I would like you to pull your cards out now, because I think that it's very important for you to see that while niggas were doing actual activism for themselves, you weren't fucking here because you were prepping and planning to fucking destroy them. There are niggas all over this room that are anti-capitalist and have been planning and creating things since before this round began, but you don't have the ability to ever see that, which is why your movements will inevitably leave those niggas out. Second, these movements then create more violence for these people. One, because they can never understand the necessities of these people, and then they can never understand the necessities of these people, and then create worse policies for them. You're arguing about fascism. Understand fascism one day. I think it's fascist as fuck to assume that you can create a policy for niggas that you don't even know, but that you don't even know. This understanding of communism also then fundamentally requires a necessity for crushing people that do not fit within the movement in a particular way, because it's all about creating frames of organizing that are frames of organizing that are class first. But the ever-shifting dynamics of what informs people's lives then means that class cannot be the only thing that guys are actually the only thing that guys are oriented to, which means at best that you cannot motivate people. You cannot motivate people, especially black people. Now we think that the question of this debate is not about the best strategies to challenge capitalism, but the best strategy that creates representation for black people and representation for black people in antagonistic spaces. One, it's key to giving them the accessibility to theories like this, which is necessary. We think that creating accessible representation matters. Participation in spaces like debate news, representation in terms of form and style, art, music, and sound contributes to diversified debate. Black participation becoming low, and they're almost exclusive. You are only with the party when it is against black people. White people learn to assemble because of black people. They say organize because of class, but there's always a deeper antagonism, because especially in the context of this activity. How did you miss the planning for this? This was because you didn't give a fuck about it. Their argument proper assumes it's a fragmented knowledge or a localized knowledge. Our argument is that it's able to export to the larger. It's not about understanding, or it's not about letting capitalism run wild, but rather it's about having a mechanism for understanding the way that capital is produced differently. This justifies the permutation due the affirmative and permutation due both with the relationality stuff as a net benefit and as an organizing principle. Conceding choreosonics as an organizing principle is the biggest mistake they've made in this round. Their arguments about embodiment, assuming that it's only a question of saying excess, pushing out the political imagination. No, things like voting organizations in favelas in Brazil prove an ability to export this to the political. But you also cannot capture the vibes, which is what all their cap arguments or all their indices of cap are about. They're about being able to capture the vibration, but you cannot capture the ways that those things are able to create relationality to certain people. The avoiding institutions argument. Their argument is that we are able to avoid institutions. There are three responses to this. First, that the 1AC doesn't ignore institutions, but forms black institutions. Second is that if your argument is that institution building is good, it is important to know the individuals and what they're doing in these institutions and the ways that they will inevitably be targeted. Their argument is that they can deal with things like chauvinism, but they can never deal with the ways in which black people will inevitably be pushed out of these movements or targeted in these movements. Think like the things that John Africa and the Booth bombing then proved that whenever black people try to organize in a particular manner that is only against class, they get fucked up because of it. You don't have an ability to resolve the way that black people will be targeted through anti-capitalism, which means that at best the only thing that provides a strategy for black people to survive while planning is things like choreosonics, things that give them the ability to relate to each other and give them the ability to plan with each other with people that they know they can trust. And you don't have a mechanism for that. Their argument is that neoliberal capitalism produces extinction. We have impact turned that because we have said that focusing on the way that violence is produced is bad.
Ready?
Yeah.
Party in this room. Who's in charge?
Who's in charge? I don't think anyone's in charge.
Who's a voting member?
Huh?
Who's a voting member?
It wasn't about voting. This is the process, right? Your argument assumes this is some fancy ass club that niggas need to get into and buy access into, like voting. We don't think that that's the way that the party that our party is organized. We think we played music and niggas rallied around it, but you couldn't
People
hear it because
rallied
you were
around. Did you get to decide who rallied around?
No, niggas just showed up. Like
Great.
literally, dead ass. You were like you
How
weren't
do you
here for it.
decide?
Niggas just showed up, and we was just like, you down? We did a whole
So
examination.
you
test.
create
You
relations
wasn't
with
here.
people. You create
Look
relations
at
with
your
people
side
through
of
the
the room.
music
It's
because they
just
show
niggas
up.
that haven't decided yet.
You
Like,
create relations with
what are we
people
doing
who
here?
show up to you.
Huh?
Who do you don't have any gatekeeping on who you create relationships with.
No, nigga, we played music, and niggas just showed up. Everyone was just like, you down? Yeah, they was like,
What if
all
someone
right.
didn't like the music?
Huh?
What if someone doesn't like the music?
They could have told us to change it. I don't know what you're talking about.
What if a white
we
person
never
told you to
forced, we
change
never
it?
asked
They told
anybody
you
to
to
do it,
turn
but
it
your movement requires niggas be crushed if they don't.
What if a white person who is part of your party
Sam
told you to
Lane was
change
here.
your song?
Oh wait, oops.
Okay.
I don't know what you mean.
If we don't organize and discuss the production of larger scale
We
movements,
did that too. These niggas produce badges. Like,
they produce badges. What
Yeah.
else have they done?
huh?
What else has been done?
We vibe, we talk. We had a whole conversation about anti-capitalism too.
Cool. What came out of that?
Huh?
There's no leaders.
Yeah, because
There's no voting members.
I think
So
those are
white
bad.
people got to decide and have a equal
the
say
impacts
in
are
the
bad.
process of anti-capitalist
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, hella white people just make shit for us.
Yeah, niggas just make shit for us. I think that's great. I think white people doing labor for us is fantastic.
Choreosonics.
I don't know what you mean.
Choreosonics.
Yeah,
You've
what's up?
made arguments about how it is something that you did in your neighborhood. You
Yeah.
made arguments about how it's something you do in your room. You made arguments about how it's something you did in before this round and in this space. Can we, if we impact turn one of these, which you said in your we meet to our burn of rejoinder argument that we could impact turn in specific spaces, do we win this round?
I mean, I think you would need to win that those impact turns outweigh it, or that those impact turns are the only things that matter.
We're
But-
literally providing examples of the affirmative working in this space. I think that
Yeah,
if you don't have
and I
it, this
wanna
is
know-
the very ways in which we can organize in this space.
If
It's pretty
I impact
embarrassing,
turn,
especially when
you
we're
doing it-
manifesting it right here,
If
right
we
now.
I don't
impact
know.
turn, you
I
doing
would-
it in your
I
community.
would need to see it because I'm not just gonna give you a yes or no answer. I honestly that's
What is-
that's ridiculous to ask me.
what is
like
the-
if I do this, you know what? How about this? I'll give you like 10 conditions, and if you meet all of them, then
I just
you'll
want to
win
know
it.
what
Does
the
that count?
threshold is for choreosonics as a method. Because right now it seems like 5 different things that all have a common tie of playing music that builds relationships.
We made an argument that choreosonics is a means of creating relationality with other
Is
bodies.
it the
or-
same when you put it in a performance round versus you do it in your community versus you do it before a round?
I don't know if
Does
it's. I mean,
choreosonics
we
change
change
in
we
those
change the
conditions?
music. We change the music sometimes. Is that your question?
What is the difference
I
between those?
played a lot of different music at the block party. One song would not have done it. If you had met any of them, one song would not have done it.
10?
My friends, go do valuable work. stop her?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's the K.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's like the next weekend is all. Yeah. Basically. Oh.
Is there like a two go?
I sent a card out.
Oh yeah. That's good.
No idea that I write some cards.
It's the same one that I always read.
I don't need no cards anymore.
That's
I'm ready.
that tiny little Dean card. It's that one.
Yeah, Pete, appreciate that.
Consistent.
Oh no, I've seen it.
Anyone not ready? Oh yeah, the overview is like not big.
So I do.
It's just the K.
Yeah, just the K. Capitalism is in the midst of a crisis. The question before you is whether the left will organize to build communism or allow fascism to take its place. This is a uniqueness question that should frame your prioritization of this space. Capitalism will collapse by 2050 because the rate of profit tends to fall. Will be replaced by fascism and the status quo because the right is using the strategy of scope and scale. That's the Shaviro evidence. Fascism causes extinction. They cause rally around the flag effects. They cause systematic degradation of marginalized population, increase hotspots, social unrest, and climate change. But I don't need extinction to win this debate because fascism exacerbates structural violence, militarizes the police, expands the prison industrial complex, and justifies rampant crimes against marginalized people, which makes it infinitely more difficult to organize choreosonic parties. The impact debate proper. Util is good. Their impact calculus relies upon the supremacy of social valuations of life over physical life. It was also like 3 seconds at the end of the 2AR or 2AC and not an argument. It was reactionary because it grasps on every instance of social inequity to justify continued devaluation of marginalized bodies, which focuses our politics to the micro instead of the macro, which enables the continuation of social and physical death. They make a framing argument about violence. Our argument is that you should evaluate debate as a question of aspirational politics. The system only responds to material disruptions in the circulation of surplus value. Any RC affirmative fails to confront our political economy is a reason to vote negative because it thrives off of false schemes of resistance to maintain complicity in the system by attaching aspiration to immaterial tactics. You should use this space to prioritize revolutionary strategy. Obviously, producing a party in this space is great, but I'm going to get to impact turning the way they did it in a little bit. That's key to education and iterative testing to produce tactics that debaters can utilize. The third reason why our framework is true is our theorization of anti-blackness. It is produced through the material relationship of black flesh to economies of financialization. That's why every incarnation of anti-blackness on the political level is a mechanism of capital, from slavery to the prison industrial complex. That proves that financialization enables commodification that prevents black people from having power. That's the Amaro evidence, the ultimate. I'm going to do it here, the alternatives to affirm party organizing, only vertical organization that arms communities with communist theory and praxis creates a connection between local institution building and global movements that requires modes of accountability to correct bad praxis and leftist movements in building institutions, both within and outside of the state. The alternative endorses movements like the African People's Socialist Party, located in Florida. They build dual power through their reparations programs and building mutual aid, but the way they do that is having a strict hierarchical leadership structure, i.e. all of the white people join a group called the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which exists underneath the African People's Socialist Party. They organize them and make it impossible for white people to determine the direction of the movement within that particular instance, because that is a black Marxist strategy. Their party obviously doesn't do that because they give white people an equal voice and don't do any vetting within them at all, which is proven by the fact that a lot of the white people that they gave cards to just fucking left and aren't going to do anything for the rest of this fucking debate. The alternative solves the apple, not the other way around. They've conceded a uniqueness question that should frame the Altus as local fragmented politics are the bread and butter of the modern day left. Those prevent scale upwards, which means even if the alternative is imperfect, it's the only option left for the left to in order to get power away from fascists. Their in-round party actually demonstrates mutual exclusivity pretty well. We're going to go for gatekeeping good. The fact that they just let anyone who happens to be in this room into their party allows any number of people who do a bunch of fucked up shit, who have no relationship or any investment in the black community whatsoever, who just happen to be in this space and think that their music is a good thing. That's a terrible model because cops can like their music, fascists can like their music, and people who are racist can obviously like their music. You need a mode of accountability based on a political line that comes to a decision based within Marxist theorization, which demonstrates clear mutual exclusivity between the app and the alt, and proves that permutation due to the app is a non-starter. They have also conceded that anti-accountability praxis is key to stop anti-blackness. It is true that a lot of black people have been kicked out of communist movements in the past. That's because those were horizontal movements without any democratic, centrally decided mechanism of accountability. For instance, Red Bloom in 2016, which is a vertical organization structure, just kicked somebody who was instrumental in the organization out for being anti-black as shit. The only reason they were able to do that is because they had a determined set of rules and obligations that people had to abide by. Their party doesn't produce that because they just let anyone the fuck in and don't have any official mechanisms for what it takes to be removed from that party, which means anti-black shit can happen all the time and they are completely powerless to defending it. The permutation... Oh wait, no. They say your class first struggle is bad. Our Amaro evidence should probably disprove that we are a class first basis. We understand anti-blackness to be rooted within racial capitalism at the fundamental level. They have to do a lot of link work specific to our examples to demonstrate that this is an argument. They say in the context of this, that having a party in the context of this activity is good. We agree. That's probably a reason why they should defend what they have done in this space as an example of how choreosonics spills outward within the context of other black movements. The permutation debate, I'm going to do it here. There's first a momentum to sad. The affirmative regurgitates anxieties for political engagements, which collapse left-wing resistance towards fascism. This is a time frame argument that outweighs the permutation. The affirmative slows the alt down too much to seize power. That's Shaviro. Inclusionism to sad. The purity politics are good. Infinite inclusivity reinforces capitalist domination. Dean 14. The effective restrictive politics. The individual subject consistently divided. Collective subject no different without diversity. Affects, fantasies, desires, influences. We exclude that this is a point in history rather than to find the inclusive philosophical left race accept the subject wrong should be rejected. Those wishes at once reinforce capitalist domination. The permutation is theoretically illegitimate. No perms and method debates. That's key to education and advocacy skills. Making a choice between two independent advocacies against capitalism is key to iterative testing in activist circles. It's also a voter for fairness. Method debates are infinitely permeable since they make theory or praxis as core. You should presume some opportunity cost to preserve stable negative ground. Both permutations sever out of both their theory and praxis, especially what they did in this round. That's a voter for education and fairness because it makes the affirmative functionally conditional, allows them only to defend certain parts of the affirmative, which makes it impossible to be negative and have rigorous clash. All links are disadded to the permutation. Doing them now. The first link is aestheticization. The affirmative is a cultural project in a world governed by economics. Choreosonics is a form of cultural artifacting that fails to produce communities for care, but the intention and impact of those communities is predetermined by capitalism. This is proven in cross-links of the 1AC when they articulate themselves as a performance of resistance. It's not resistance, it's simply the simulation of resistance itself, which becomes a palliative. Everyone who has a card over there probably thinks they're hot shit because they picked up a card, but you don't know jack about how they're going to articulate that within the context of an actual movement outside of this space. That the impact is commodification. Cultural performance gives neoliberalism another form of faux transgression to provide the illusion of resistance. I'll give an example here. Afropunk. It's a music festival meant to highlight black community and music. Last year, it was revealed that Afropunk was sold out to corporations, exploited its workers, and underpaid its artists. That turns every single facet of the affirmative because it proves that the people who have the capacity to gain energy from the affirmative are ones privileged enough to be within the context of the audience. It also turns the argument about producing worlds for themselves because they produce bad worlds that are always sutured by capitalism. The second link is folk politics. The affirmative's praxis is hyperlocalization as a gut reaction to how universal politics have been used for oppressive purposes. In doing so, it eliminates the possibility to reclaim Prometheanism for the purpose of producing a sustainable world. That's proven by how communities can choose. They think that communities whether or not to accept power by simply investing in faith in it. This ignores how capitalism is a coercive, dominating structure that determines everyone's relationship to the world. You can't just opt out of capitalism, but you certainly can organize against this. That turns all of their victim-blaming arguments. They blame black people who haven't mastered themselves enough in order to understand themselves in relationship to capital. Most black people can't just leave the material world like their cone evidence suggests in the wake of things like eviction. That means they only produce small, local zones of survival. The impact is redeployment. Capitalism can't be chipped away at, requires collective action and solidarity across difference. This is demonstrated by Bosville, Louisiana, which was a neighborhood of color that rallied to react against the replacement of a toxic waste dump near their homes. They succeeded by speaking out and relying on their personal experience, but the plant only moved to another neighborhood of color. That proves that they might produce some interim zones of resistance in this space or whatever space they entered, but capitalism will only redirect itself in different locations, which just exports that violence elsewhere. The third link is embodiment. Embodied praxis is bad. It causes hyperfixation on the here and now, which prevents discussion of long-term tactics. This is a uniqueness question. The left is currently too diffuse and horizontal. That's because the turn to embodied pedagogy has prevented us from strategically utilizing abolition. That's Reed. I think I made mutual exclusivity clear in Crossix. They say that institutionalization and abstraction of thought are bad. We're saying that's good. There's a specific link to survival focus too. It's a wounded attachment. They can never move beyond where they are now. Crawley describes black life existing in a dialectical relationship to cruel violence. That's a hyper-identification with anti-black violence that prevents authentic cultural experience. That turns case. The fourth link. Yeah, the fourth link is revolutionary subject to don't abandon the human or power, seize them to make praxis that can do more than just imagine worlds but build them. Cross-6 of the one I see proves their link. Their cards, as well as their interpretation of power, are both fundamentally anti-humanist. Humanism is good. The affirmative cruel pessimism towards the human makes the worst form of liber-humanist violence inevitable. That's Schoensack and Williams. The only way to redefine the human subject is through demands that reshape the political economy. Their broad unsettlement doesn't interact or begin with the material, which allows the right to continue defining what the human ought be, i.e. what affirms this world, and what the human can be, i.e. what affirms the next world. The last argument I have to answer is that black people are targeted through anti-capitalist organizing. You should read this through both the examples we've given as well as the Amaro evidence. The 2AC was very ethosful, but it lacked any specificity whatsoever, especially in the context of how we've been reading Cap all year.
And nothing has changed. Alright.
Yep.
So, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this argument about the necessity to seize the human. How do you seize the human?
So it's a question of reframing the political intention of the human. So our argument via Schoensack and Williams is that there's always going to be a subject-object distinction. It's a question of positioning that.
So who's the subject and who's the object?
So we think that all humans should be the subjects.
All humans should be the subject.
Yeah.
How do you make all humans the subject? Because you just said inclusivity bad.
Yeah, that's through praxis. So we're not saying that everybody joins the party. That's not humanism. Our argument is rather that our political goals should be strategized towards producing a world that is livable for all people.
Got it. All lives matter. So horizontal movements are bad, vertical movements are good. What is the distinction between the two?
A horizontal
external of just like an organizing principle.
Yeah, a horizontal movement is one that lacks an organizational structure, usually doesn't have a form of democratic central decision-making skills. I think that's pretty evident by that.
I guess my question is like, if it's only a question of how the party is organized, or if it's only a question of the way that the party becomes organized, how then do we create a frame for understanding what happens within the party without letting certain people's desires go above others? Like I'm pretty sure the head of Red Balloon did some like really fucked up shit to people, right?
Yes.
Cool. And y'all just kicked them out.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So what happened to all those people that he did fucked up shit to?
So obviously there would be a process of restorative justice and reconciliation.
What was it?
That would be determined.
What was it? You gave an example. What was it?
So that person got kicked out of the movement, and the people who were affected by that were able to engage in a process where they reformed the...
What was the process?
I'm doing that. Where they get brought into dialogue with other leaders of the movement in order to reframe how the party does its shit.
So they engaged in conversations to make the party better.
Yes.
Is your answer for how they got like restorative justice? They helped the party.
I mean, I also don't know the other things they did because I don't know them very well. I didn't.
Of course you don't. You don't even know a lot of black people very well. Let's talk about the small local zones of survival. What is the difference between a small local zone of survival and or between a lot of small local zones of survival and globality? Because you made an argument that says that like engaging in global politics good, or is global politics not just a converging of a bunch of small local zones of survival?
No, because a global politic requires a universal abstract thought that produces a political
Is
line.
Black life not universal and abstract enough for you?
Well, yeah, that's obviously a fucking truism, but our argument about the way that you've presented your political strategy is one of that refuses abstraction, which refuses to make Black life a universal political demand.
Okay, cool. So, like, you don't think that our AF would say Black life good? You don't think? Our AF
No,
would,
that's not.
You don't think
all
our
that
AF would
I
say
said.
that that's a good political? Fine. What's a political demand?
A political demand is or I guess it's a demand or a strategy that directly affects the means of production, i.e.
The
land,
means of
labor, and
production.
capital. Yeah.
Cool. Are the means of production structured based on like Black labor?
No. Our Amaro evidence demonstrates that the means of production are organized
How do you
via
have a theory of racial capitalism? That's not true. How do you have a theory of racial capitalism?
Our theory is one of financial capital based in the Middle Passage. It was a card that you dropped, so a little too late to answer it.
Case. There shouldn't be any cards unless Reed is like, read this card.
Don't do it,
They're
Reed.
wrong.
Don't do it.
If, given that the case debate has like a lot of different arguments on it, I'm gonna do the framing stuff quick at the top. Then I'm gonna go on to line by line and I will signpost where I'm going.
Really good. So you're doing the frame stuff at the top?
Yeah, just like the burden of a joiner stuff at the top. Then I'll signpost.
Right.
Anyone not ready? I roll the judges. Our argument is that a first should defend an exportable method within this space debate is a unique space to deliberate about what models of organizing we choose. It allows us to focus on questions of organization that are key to tactical development and the depth of debate that is key to every single movement. The contestation of tactical education is the necessary precondition to any exportable practice. We agree that they meet this framework right now, but if the 1AC collapses down to just being about this one debate round, you should vote negative because that shifts the capacity for us to limit a more broad practice. We can revive this argument if we need to. I really don't know what in what spaces the after-defense choreosonics are, because in the rear beat argument, they said that we could impact turn specific spaces in which choreosonics could be battle context, which means we believe that we have done that in the context of the capitalism critique, and we will do that in the context of this debate round, which means those should be sufficient to disprove the 1AC because they have forwarded as a strategy that is good in those spaces, and we can prove that that is wrong, absent proving that every single instance of listening to music, because that is a threshold that makes it impossible for us to negate, because it hyper-individualizes strategy, and it turns out being broader questions that are necessarily more contestable. I.e., what should we as a collective do in the context of the problems of semio-capitalism and recognition and capitalism itself? The relationality debate, on the overview, their emphasis on relationality is defamed and reproduced by semiotic capitalism. I'm going for the affective because they really didn't answer well enough. There are two internal links. First, they have found within Sonics a liberatory gesture that they want to spread to literally proliferate to build a community outside of that, and which requires them to inject in the space of recognition and consumption where literally other people hear the music, consume the music, and in that way affectively identify with the political position produced by the 1AC when they say things like, who got the power, that creates an affective identification by white folks who be way impact turns. Second, they have structured this product in a base space which is uniquely bad because it puts it into a process of spectatorship and consumption that necessitates a competent framework to understand the 1AC and casting a judgment upon that would necessarily short-circuit the process and capacity to build relationality because it requires the possibility of negation, which means they'll never produce enough for the right sort of relationality, but always producing an antagonistic framework which creates a reactionary affective community whereby the structure of the debate round necessitates an antagonistic formation between people, which is the reason why it makes it impossible to organize this space like debate. The impact to these two links is expropriation. The 1C strategy gets taken up by representational economic capitalism that turns into a mode of cultural capital that's weaponized against black communities. Think about Phil Collins, think to quote discover Jimbe, and then everyone travel to fucking Africa and say we are Africa, even though they didn't know what the fuck that meant. Think about all the white people in this room who feel ethical because they have a fucking card. The 1AC becomes weaponized to justify white folks' own anti-blackness as they take the music into their own space to help them see woke and hip, which turns the after music they proliferate is taken away from them and perverted by semiotic capitalism. Think about the way that things like white and capital control the music industry, gives Eminem all the rap Grammys, the way that black artists' music lyrics are changed and artists are picked, or some artists aren't picked up by the producers because the white artists or white producers don't like their method. All these are the ways the 1AC politics and capitalism controls the direction of music because it produces the theft of the very modes of relationality they rely upon that destroys the value and the ability to relate to the music in the first place, because capitalism takes it away from that which gives it intrinsic value to them and the capacity to build relationality. It turns the case when they say who gave you the power, that doesn't cause white folks to question themselves, it causes white people to consume that statement in a faux radicalism of white guilt. They become the fucking post Malones that say, yeah, that's fucking deep, which enables them to recirculate the 1AC, but and rob it of its relationship with blackness. This reproduces and intensifies the logics of that are central to both the 1AC and racialized capitalism in the form of capitalist expropriation and accumulation, which happens because they've situated their strategy in relationship to a dialectic of recognition, and in which I think in the Nyong'o evidence that we read on the criticism, and also the Garda whose name I cannot pronounce, that we read on the 1AC about the effigy. Our argument is that the simulation of resistance in subspace is necessarily backtracked, that we should be able to impact turn the problem-solution binary argument. It's inevitable. We always have to respond to crises and problems that confront us when people in your community are being evicted, and we should listen to music, we should build tenancy, we lend trust, etc., to build proactive institutions of action.
They also did it.
Yeah, they also did it, which is the argument that they have done, because they afforded impacts, they respond to it, they had problems, they afforded the problem on the capital, all of this, returns their energy arguments, their problems reactive to social balance, because they refuse to use vertical solutions that are focused on resolving the problem proactively. Instead, they refuse the problem focus, which generates complacency, because they frame problems unnecessarily and never, which means to justify, which justifies an inactivity towards the argument the alternative produces energy by doing the organizing work that enables a better world, by creating the conditions so we don't lose our energy. The community mobilization and social relationality arguments will impact them. They say counterinsurgency impact in the semio-capitalism oriented about the idea that black folks have no culpability and their relationship to capitalist violence, or that we shouldn't theorize agency are solely positive for black folks. Short circuits the 1AC, for example. Black capitalism was a term invented by Nixon after the civil rights when black folks go to tell other black folks in the community they have the capacity to produce social agency vis-a-vis a process of financialization and capital or shut down and sap the energy from the civil rights movement. Our argument that we have to connect into individual agency to the capacity to resist capitalism, which presents its weaponization by semio-capitalism. Any other framework necessarily suitures it both to the trauma of racialization and the capacity for a neoliberal promise of the good life that comes afterwards. The reason why we should not understand social agency within the dialect that they propose. The quote, we theorize black bargain, that's bad. The Truancy really didn't have an explicit impact, or a reason why this would be. We get new Truan our answers in the 1AR if the 1AR exposed this, but the Truancy answered this in like 3 places and we've impact turned above because we should be able to theorize that sort of thing. That was the burden of rejoinder debate, and the burden of rejoinder debate above. Also, we're reading authors from black folks, that they're the ones who are theorizing black life. We're simply extrapolating upon their arguments to apply to the 1AC. The last argument that they make is that there's this argument about the launch efforts, which they have mishandled, because our argument that putting the performance of social life into the dialect of recognition situates the performance of relationship to an overcoming of trauma, which links the capacity to produce whose positive social relations to the impact of corruption. The performances are consumed by a symbolic economy to produce standards of social life that become used to police other black folks who don't have the same social life as they do, or do not perform it in the same way. And if the method of the 1AC, for example, Claudia Colvin, she was a black woman who refused to give up her seat on the bus months before Rosa Parks did, but the black civil rights movement refused to fight for her because she didn't live up to the standards of social life that they had produced. The authentic one. She was poor, she had a kid, and then married, etc. Which in the weapon and then teacher economy weaponized the gap in the same way we're starting to give the precondition for the incorporation of the black community. If you don't relate to their sonics, they don't fuck with you.
Alright. What is it?
847.
847.
847.
Alright, a few questions. One, do you think we don't fuck with you because you don't fuck with our music?
That's not our argument.
Okay.
Our argument is that semiotic capitalism takes
Cool.
the question of
Second question.
relationality.
Are you a part of the party?
Which party?
The party.
Your party.
Our party?
Yeah, I'm a member of the DSA. They're also a member of the DSA. We also do work with the ISO.
Yeah.
I'm also a member of Chameleon.
do. It's just that I don't.
It's just last round that I mentioned I don't trust debaters to time themselves. And this is why.
Correct.
Fair. I was about to do that. I have no idea, and I really don't care. But you should finish the debate before the decision time. That's all I was saying. Otherwise, I'm gonna be like, listen, Tad, they didn't finish.
That's when you get to.
Y'all get to choose.
You don't have to flip the coin.
But then I feel like I sat here for like 2.5 hours for no reason.
George doesn't like the sound of that at all.
Yeah, all I heard was no reason.
You say y'all Africans near Washington?
Neg is Ray Washington. Nico and Jacob were Af against Harvard.
Oh. Who's Harvard who?
The 9-I-Use team. I feel bad. My bad, Campbell.
Because you got the whole pairing too. BG?
I don't know their initials.
BG.
Isn't that Emily
Gordon?
Oh, Emily Gordon?
Yeah.
Emily, good people.
My bad, Corey.
I don't think it's
He was laughing.
Yeah, JS.
He's a person.
Yeah, Mexican.
They're a nice person. There's at least they're nice two people.
Right. Very pleasant.
Yeah, exactly.
Then Mary Washington did
Well,
that.
my ass in high school like really badly. And they're like, that was a really fun debate. I'm like, no, it wasn't.
For one of them. Hey, for you maybe, right?
Yeah.
Definitely not for me.
Should have had Sherry. What we got for dinner today? Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. She was already telling me about this salmon. Hopefully,
Who's he at?
one year they had ceviche. I remember one year. I can't remember when it was. But it was one year the bank had ceviche.
I remember that.
Oh, you know what I want to do? I want to see who on the stream.
Shot glass ceviche.
Let me see who on the stream
Who
is
on the
talking.
stream is shit talking?
Oh, EF City, Kansas.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Is that a thing? People gonna do that on the stream?
I used to shit talk on the stream. I was there.
That's the thing.
Not when HP does it. It's effective.
Money.
I'm good on that player. Yeah. How about you think?
I skipped the one.
Seriously started complaining about how we take down
How you take this?
Is one of the white men wearing a dress? Chris isn't a dude.
Not a dude. Also, hi.
I'm also not a dude. Hi.
That's why y'all shouldn't. That's why you.
Oh, they're reading the chat.
I love reading the comments. It's so much fun.
You want to see what the comments?
Yeah, some guy was like,
Comments are.
he's one of the white men wearing a dress.
Wait, do we got everybody? Y'all good?
Yeah.
All right, we gotta go. George,
Also,
you got.
it's a skirt. Thank you. It has pockets, so it's cool.
That's awesome.
Whatever, man.
All right.
They just hating. They hating on the swag. That's all.
That's what I'm saying. You aren't in dubs with the NDT. True.
Yeah.
Watch me, bitch.
It's gonna be cased in for casing. There's gonna be an overview on case too. Is anybody not ready? You good, George?
You said it's cased in the case?
Yeah. Okay, alright. Then conceded that representation matters. Participation in debate needs representation in terms of form and style. Our music and style contributes to the diversity in debate. Black participation is becoming low, and their alternative is exclusive. You are only with the party when it's against black people, i.e. we've already been organizing in this space, which is our example of the ways in which choreosonics has already produced a sort of communal attachment to create our form of socialism. We are only with the party when it's against black people. White people learn to assemble because of black people. They say that they organize because of class, but there's always a deeper antagonism that is especially true in the context of this activity. How did we miss the planning meetings for your party? You had a meeting on how to organize against us. The alternative is unethical due to how it is organized. The invitation is tailor-made to debate, which means it isn't revolutionary. We are winning a particular reason to affirm our sound, and it's unique to our discussion. If this isn't one of the most creative discussions of the topic, I don't know what is. They're conceding 3 reasons to vote affirmative. 1 is choreosonics, music, vibration, structures, all values, and how those values are traded amongst us, i.e. the ability for the commodity to produce intrinsic values of flesh, and the performance to produce a whole new value in general. Produces a vibration, which was the music zone black, says that you're rushing to destruction because you have nothing to lose. Proves that only relying on your political organization will fail because alternative performances are pathologized, i.e. they get to demonize our mode of organization because we include music. But that proves our pathology claim. And when some says that no one has power yet they act like God, proves that people can perform the executive and subjugate certain bodies, but also proves our God complex arguments that they hold us accountable for the ways in which Spotify sort of circulates arguments and circulates music and capitalism. We should not be held culpable for the ways in which capitalism can sort of circulate music within the outside realm. They're not winning a specific link to the 1AC. Choreosonics transforms our spatial relationships and dynamics and reconverts how values are exchanged with power is no longer vested in the executive, but rather into blends because we are not of this world. 2, it's otherwise possibility, the ability to exist external whiteness and violence to create a world. This actual practice of choreosonics from black. Since that we go on and on, that's how we never gave up and kept going to shape our world and define ourselves. I went the grill and the barbecue, the slither, and laughing in space. It was the homies, the moments absent of bonds. 1 in which we put spirituality back in the community. Their theorization is only one that attaches blackness to violence, i.e. all of their examples about the ways in which fascism can uniquely violate black bodies. Our arguments that we need to start from a sort of positive frame for our politics, or else it only beget more of violence. The 3rd reason about affirmative is our impact turns to the problem-solution dichotomy. There must be an impact. Someone must be dying. White fragility reduces that dichotomy's relationship with problem-solution. They necessitate the continuous process of creating solutions that function as a problem that never any cycle for every solution is easy to fix, but that leads to the collateral damage and the visibilization of black communities like pollution and death. But also, we sacrifice ourselves to make movements every day. People who turn to movements don't join because they're exhausted. Black don't care. The person in charge literally killed herself. We invest so much in movements, progression, institutions that we forget our bodies don't meet that, which is why choreosonics produces a better mode of organizing because we sustain movements, not that we can do, not that we engage in that boring shit over there, but rather that we can actually create some sort of we can actually create movements. We can actually create movements through choreosonics. The top of the 1 and R was all about how they can win the link to win the round. But yes, that's how debate works. If you win a link and you prove that it outweighs, you'll probably win. But that has not disproved the 1AC. All of their arguments about white folk recognizing themselves in the poem should not hold us accountable for that. That's all about the Sun Ra arguments of the ways in which they hold us culpable for how white people see themselves in the affirmative. Not that we have actively produced that. That holds us accountable, which reproduces the God complex. Their arguments about white people feeling ethical because the card makes no sense in the world where we're winning, that we were the ones that organized this sort of we organized the movement, which proved that white people worked for us. Their arguments about we engaging in the impact of the problem solution dichotomy makes no sense when our arguments that we have not produced a solution, but rather have produced a mode of organizing, which is not a solution, but is a step back to understand how we can situate and reform certain politics. Their arguments about their arguments about social agency within theorization makes no sense when the cone evidence about coming together under the frame of social justice. They say that they read black authors, but okay, you get to make black authors take the bullet for your sort of argument, for sort of your frames, which proves our argument in the ways in which you can hide behind your theorization. Okay. They are conceding the permutation, which is a permutation due to the affirmative. We have conceded that we have already capitalism. We already have fucking cards that indicate that we were organizing from this very start. You have only pathologized our mode of performance because we include music, but that proves our pathology arguments that I already explained. You say revolutionary strategies. Choreosonics is already revolutionary strategy, which is key to education and iterative testing because we've proven that our representation matters within this space. Your theorization of black flesh and slavery is uniquely violent because it becomes internalized, which creates psychological violence and ruins movements, especially because people become disincentivized from joining. Their arguments about they've considered that even when black folk organize under the alternative world is uniquely worse because people like John Africa literally get bombed when they try to organize. They had their own system, their own healthcare, and when it was Afrocentric, it was all about politics, but literally which proves that they create hyper-specific violence upon black communities. They say that They said that we don't get a permutation because it's a method debate. No, our argument is that we should get a permutation because it creates. We went for permutation due to the affirmative, which is not a permutation, but rather is a link term indicating that we are already anti-capitalism. Proves that capitalism cannot capture back the performance of the 1AC because we produce an intrinsic value. Capitalism can only sort of circulate objects insofar as they can be sold and traded, but insofar as that object has intrinsic value through speaking or through performing, it's uniquely different. Their arguments about Afropunk, again, where the fucking 1AC is not Afropunk, but your ability to frame us that way proves that you can pathologize us in the ways in which we perform. Your arguments about victim blaming, your arguments are back on the permutation. They make this argument that we can infinitely permeate the alternative, but we obviously haven't. You should hold them culpable for. You should hold us accountable for what we did. We did not permeate 1,000 ways, which proves that this argument is arbitrary, but also proves that you hold us accountable for shit that we didn't do, which is the God complex argument that we're already impacting out. Their arguments about humanism, good and abstraction, only proves that their theorization is one that uniquely allows for us to lose ourselves within that theory, because it's all about abstraction and not the individual people within that shit.
648.
648.
I got some comments.
Hey, I can't see the comments. What I gotta go to the college posse page?
I assume it's on Facebook.
Yeah.
You don't need to read that now.
Oh, I want to see. I want to see what they say.
It's not even worth doing.
I'm not debating. I ain't debating right now. I ain't got no horses in this race. I ain't doing nothing either.
You agree with the toxic shit ain't good for you.
Yeah.
Hey man, toxic shit sometimes is fun. You gotta embrace the toxicity.
That's very interesting. Okay.
I mean, I'm not gonna.
We all make choices, I guess.
Everybody make choice. And we ain't watching.
Nothing right now. The internet is kind of meh.
Everybody over here at one time.
So what?
Our debate world on the internet right now.
Yeah.
I ain't got hungry when y'all was trying to do it.
George, can I plug your phone in my computer so I can plug in my computer?
It's a 2 sides on it too.
Yeah, I know, but my cord ain't that long.
Yeah, you good.
It's going to be the K and then case. So this will be a little bit messy, not going to lie. But what? Thanks. But I'm going to try to answer like their offensive sections on the case, and then like their defensive shit on the K. I'll signpost.
I was just looking at you like that. Don't mind my facial expression.
I've learned not to.
Yeah.
KK?
Yeah, K case. Anybody not ready? Cool. Material violence outweighs capitalism is collapsing and fascism will take over. That causes extinction and at least exacerbates all the forms of structural violence and making it impossible for black people to have their own imminent forms of power within their communities. All of the forms of violence like policing, etc. that they describe in the affirmative gets worse after 2050 if the left doesn't get their shit together. That outweighs, it's irreversible, and their representational focus causes a reactionary logic wherein we hold everything to find optimal representation, which constantly postpones organizing. That was a util argument that was dropped in the 1AR. That means it's a very low threshold for voting negative. If I win any risk that choreosonics spills over to produce bad organizational practice, then you should vote negative, and they've dropped a whole lot of reasons. The first link is embodiment. It's bad. It prevents theorization of the abstract, which is a precondition for effective communist politics. This is demonstrated by their performance in this debate. Here's a uniqueness argument. Right now, the left is diffuse and horizontal. That's the reason why fascists have been so successful, because there's no universal left-wing resistance, no institution that everyone can go to in order to get the resources they need to fight back. They said their performance in this space proves the link. It was the epitome of horizontalist organizing that has been the reason why the left has failed for so long. They just let everybody who get into the party for just vibing to the beat. There's a couple of impacts to this, but first, they say that they lead the white people, but the 2AC said that leading white people or leading anybody in the debate in the party is fascist. That proves that their party has an internal contradiction within the affirmative, because they don't have an organizational structure at all to determine the parameters of their party, which means you should be highly skeptical of the way that their organization plays out in the real world. But a couple of things that are definitely true is that they let anyone in. This is a co-option impact. Anybody who's capable of enjoying themselves in this music and happening to be in this space, cops, the black bourgeoisie, fascists in debate, etc. Everyone gets invited to their party because they just happen to be here. This was dropped. This was dropped in the 1AR. That demonstrates that they don't have a political strategy that can mobilize people against capitalism. The other impact is accountability mechanisms. Having a deliberate vertical organization structure is necessary to hold fucked up white people accountable. They have no permanent basis for who gets to stay in the party based on what they do, whereas vertical organization structures like Red Bloom, for instance, do, and they're capable of kicking people out when they do bad things. That allows fucked up people to remain in just because they have a card and they like the vibe. That turns all of their representational arguments, because their mode of organization keeps fucked up people in debate. Keeps up fucked up people in debate just because they happen to be in proximity to the bloc party. Look, might not be the greatest argument in practice, but it was conceded, which means you should not let the 2AR have no ink on this. The second link is folk politics. They have a hyper-localization of resistance, which eliminates the possibility to produce a universal politics. The choreosonics relies on local zones of survival, which always leaves black people who don't happen to be in those zones incapable of reacting to the next violent thing. Imagine about black people who weren't in this particular space or watching the stream or maybe debating in another room. This is proven by Mossville, Louisiana. The debaters might fight back against anti-black capitalism here, but oppressive institutions will only leave to a spot that they haven't organized. That turns both their representation and their exhaustion arguments. They may produce particular imminent zones of representation and the getting rid of energy expenditure within this space, but they leave everyone else defenseless. And the alternative solves. It produces modes of representation and energy production that are universal and everybody can access regardless of their relationship to the music or the locales that they produce. So this should all answer permutation to the affirmative. They said it themselves. It's not a perm, it's a link term. This proves all of those arguments are reasons why the affirmative does not produce effective anti-capitalist organizing. The alternative proper is to engage in a mode of communist party organizing, which requires a democratic, deliberative accountability structure and vertical organization. Their only real offense against this, and is that somebody got bombed when they tried to organize in relationship to anti-capitalism. This proves, you should filter this through every example we've given as well as our Amaro evidence. We're not race-neutral anti-capitalist politics. Our argument is that black fungibility is at the core of why labor continues, i.e. the financialization argument via both Amaro as well as all of our examples from the African People's Socialist Party to Red Bloom. It demonstrates that we are making an argument not about the theorization of Marxism, but the praxis that, but about the praxis that they produce. Really, yeah, I'm gonna answer all the rest of their arguments on case. So go there now. Conceding our theory of debate means we're turning their representation and debate argument. What we learn in this space about tactics and organizing is directly tied to what we export outside. That is the framework argument. If we win that choreosonics is a bad paradigm for resistance on a broader basis, any reason why they proliferate, it's the people in this room is a reason why they explode 100% of our links. They've taught everyone in this room to engage in a horizontal organization structure that we have proven fails. They say that the fascism impact sees black people as negative. I don't think this is not a unique impact because they also describe the way that black people are often harmed by the people in this world. Communism, however, is key to a positive identification with blackness. That was the Chernisek and Williams argument about humanism. It's not that we should never discuss anti-black violence whatsoever. That's in fact the opposite of the argument of the criticism, but that focusing on the material basis that prevents black people from organizing for different worlds is bad. They say culpability arguments first. This is new in the 1AR. You should reject it. It makes it impossible to have a deep, in-depth debate about the 2NC, but you should filter this through the framing argument. They have already told us that we can impact turn the way that choreosonics get applied in different spaces. They can't pretend that capitalism doesn't exist because it makes it difficult to win this debate because it affects how other black people get affected. That was proven by the Mossville example. They say exhaustion, and I've already done a pretty good amount of work. But if this becomes a question of recruitment within debate, they don't have a specific reason why music is key to recruitment, or at the very least, they recruit too many people, i.e. cops, fascists, etc. They say pathologization. You've also conceded that we can impact turn choreosonics in a specific way, which should be at least a link shield for the pathologization argument. We did not engage with your party because we're pathologizing black organizing, but because your organizing is bad and ineffective and produces very weak forms of attempts at organizing that are always reactive but never productive of a different world where their survival isn't even up for debate.
4 minutes?
Yeah.
case critique. I'm not going to deal with the two. There will be case arguments on the case. There will be critique arguments on the critique. There will be some cross apps just to like clean it up. But like, yeah, that whole offense.
Can we get 1 sec so Tris can...
My computer's about to crash.
Sure. We all good? For somebody that said they were going to answer the offense of the case, you dropped a lot of shit. You have conceded that choreosonics is the only mechanism for individuals to be able to create relationality with each other, which is key for their survival because understanding our communities is the only mechanism for us to ever be able to inform a politic that is able to grapple with the ways in which violence is enacted upon one another. There is not an understanding or recognition of the problem-solution binary offense, which should implicate a lot of how you view a lot of how you filter the debate as a frame argument. They have conceded that understanding the world only through solutions to material violence orients people only towards kind of frames of resolution and not towards frames of relation, which then means that they can justify the violation of certain bodies at the risk of being able to produce those. We think that this should be filtered through the representation framing argument. You have conceded that argument in order to make it a turn link turn and said that arguments that about the exemplification of this debate means that we can't create a policy that resolves communism. But you've also conceded that within spaces like this, like debate the repeated subject formation, the politics individuals represent are a lot more important than the quote-unquote method they advocate. You assume that niggas will just spot you the way to evaluate impact, counting traditional cost-benefit analysis. No, the util arguments were not dropped. They were answered by the representation framing argument that said that reps matter more than the calculated bodies because that then understands black people only as bodies, which is then the transposing argument that we have made, which is the first performative dissent and reason they should lose this debate, which is that they only understand niggas as bodies to be calculated and then leveraged within debates. It's a huge problem that you drop all of that you can see most of Tris's one are because their argument most of Tris's one are because the sessions of those arguments implicate the ways in which you should view this. Our argument is that if things like capitalism are fundamentally true, the trading of value and indicating that you are creating a politic that fundamentally requires an understanding and analysis of the way that black people die as the starting point then means that you are trading or either you are engaged in the capitalist process of trading black death in order to get a ballot, which we think is an implicated argument. If representations matter, if it means that engaging in that as your starting point means that you can never resolve it, which means that if you are a part of the party, they most certainly should vote affirmative to kick you out of it, because you corrupt the party. The second reason why you should vote affirmative is the otherwise possibilities argument, which is about the way that black people choose to represent themselves. We think that we are the only ones with a positive depiction of blackness, which is fundamentally important in spaces where black people are going to face antagonism. You have conceded that only the representations that black people have of themselves is going to do anything for us because nobody's going to do it for them. The reduction of the 1AC to just music is the ultimate reason they lose the debate. The internal interrelationality isn't just the music, but is the vibes that are produced. But is the vibes that are produced based on our understanding of relationality. Our arguments that the vibrations that are produced are uniquely good, and you don't have a response to the ways that individuals have produced vibes in this room or elsewhere, but only an argument that says that only cohering it around this politic is bad. You've conceded that this is a key starting point for how you're able to reanalyze the political and create a frame for informing the political, which means that at best we control a stronger internal link for how individuals are able to deal with and rationalize their space in the political. The cap critique, their only argument is the only effect they give force the fascism gets worse argument. At some point, there's not a threshold. You should only look at this. You should only even look at this flow if there is a link differential argument about the ways that we make it worse. They say that we make it worse, but there's not a warrant as to how the playing of music fundamentally makes it worse. Your only argument is that we don't have an organizing principle that can resolve capitalism that is terminal, that can resolve capitalism, that is terminal defects. If your argument is that inclusion is not inevitable, you don't have a reason as to why anybody that internalizes this would fundamentally make the movement worse, because your movement, based on things like Red Room, would already be resolving it. There's not a reason as to why doing this would be bad. Second is that the performative just has fundamentally turned this. Your argument is that you can X niggas out because they are not efficient enough, or because their politic isn't efficient enough, but you have conceded that your politic produces worse forms of fascism, particularly in relation to black people, because you don't have any niggas to inform your policy. All of your arguments about the ability for black people to be a part of movements, or the ability for black people to be a part of these movements, concedes the utilization argument, which says that the only reason those niggas are there is because they inform your movements and then make your movements better. This becomes a kind of capitalist trope of understanding things, the concepts of PR. Black people are only there to be a tool of information and educate you on how to not kill them, but it's never about what they need. Your argument is that we can go to higher powers in order to get what we need. No, the argument is that what we need first is a better representation of black people. The only offensive argument that can have against our understanding of how to organize and rally around vibrations is that it allows everyone in. No, our argument was not that we allow everyone in, but rather that we have engaged in critical moves of examination of individuals within localities in order to be able to rally and organize. We have won a better internal link tool to not only rallying, but to rallying and creating a mechanism for black people to be able to not only inform these movements, but to be able to be a part of them, as evidenced by the fact that they don't have an indication of how black people are able to relate to these movements external of just being a source of information. They have made arguments, or they said that that Communist Party organizing is better because it is able to engage, because it is the only thing that's able to blast capitalism. Ace in point, we've already won a terminal non-unique argument. Second, our argument is about the ways in which individuals come to relate to each other, and we think that that is how things in movements are formed in the first place. Even if you have an argument that says these movements are good, you don't have a mobilizing tool, which means that at best permutation to the affirmative resolves everything. Our argument is that if the party already exists, at least using the affirmative as a trope for helping them understand the ways that anti-capitalist movements can be good, then means that they can subscribe to other movements. You don't just subscribe to one movement and indicate that you are an identifying member of that movement, but rather engage in a lot more. Look, they don't have a specific link and link differential, not an impact that outweighs the affirmative, because their argument understands things only in constant framing, and there's no impact framing in the 2 and R. Look, we think that they have been fucking horrible and have had horrible representations. You should kick them out of the party and kick them out this fucking tournament. Send Rutgers to Octos on a 5-0.
Y'all need card dog?
That was okay.
Renee.
Is this your extension cord, or is this one that was supplied with the tournament? Let's go.
We needed to know. That was a joke. Fuck. Fucking hate you. What the hell is this profile? What the flying? Fuck.
Not buying it.
Not buying it. Who is Baudrillard? Pretty much. I mean, if you didn't predict I actually think the chats are kind of funny. I personally don't care. You might want to talk maybe on a case-by-case basis if the debaters don't want the chat to happen. You can moderate it or close it. But I personally think it's funny as shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time where I think anything really has come up, and it's just like it makes me think there's like generally
I mean, that if anyone can watch the chat, then fuck the people who watch it.
But at the same time, having the chat can be useful for people who like green light, what speech it is. So I guess like we should. If the only thing that can happen is like stupid ass high schoolers make fun of like grown ass adults, then you guys fucking ask.
Yeah. I do this shit every day.
It is pretty much all high schoolers.
Yeah.
Little bit of chat about it, like looking at it.
I presume so. Yeah, I think it's. I just think it's fucking fun.
Okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna start asking more people that question. Like, you know, maybe in addition to you on the stream, chat or off.
Yeah.
My mom.
I mean, a lot of people think we don't. A lot of people do. But only for and
Oh, can we go back and look at the comments?
We can look at the comments, man.
I lost my
Talk about.
Classic show.
we lost more.
I lost one finger. I have the other. Well, my costume.
The larger number of people you have on the piano, the more you're gonna have that like immediate feeling.
Yeah.
It's like most of us just like pulse and X. And X is sort of this sort of reaching Catholic kid or even a bunch of kids. It's like kind of like distribution problems for sometimes literally something like the top of the index. It's for some of them ethics from and then They're like real indignant about it and shit.
I really gotta feel. I never have a
I read your thing. I decided this class. Like, I'm fixing to learn something. Like, really, I missed something or whatever. Yeah, it's like, it's one thing to like get sat out on the 401 and just like not listen to anyone, or to like hear them be like, oh, I kind of fucked this thing up, or I misunderstood this, or like judges are human, they make mistakes. Like, it's better to admit it than lie to yourself and everyone else.
Thanks.
Of course, we all know if someone gets sit out on 401, they obviously don't have to go to the next round. That should be written in the NDT Constitution.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I just got fucked pretty bad. Like, give me a break. Give me a break.
That's why, we already know they decided pretty much. You know, I love debate, man.
So let me bring up the shadow tab or whatever. Congrats, Corey. I'm sure you're into it with that. You got anything? I noticed I do all those roller elements.
Not the one doing the other, hopefully. That's the only out round we got so far?
It's the only one on me, at least.
Start with just be Louisville. Yeah, it's right there.
Darby beat Louisville?
Yep.
Too bad. That's like,
Oh yeah. But they give you like matches.
like the margins are so narrow. It's just like how you kind of understand
Just
one thing.
submit a whack ass version.
Breaks everything.
Give you like
Whereas
a
like on 4-1, it's like,
better
well, someone just kind of fucked up.
Do whatever you can right up until the end. Right?
Oh, shit.
Even if it's trash, the
I always
reason
hear
period is
Matt Morgan, 2007 seeded. He was on the finals, man. He was on the bottom of the plane, too.
Damn. I wouldn't. I feel like they'll give me a judging complex like that. Probably from that too.
Well, that was the first year that OU won, like in time.
Yeah.
Against,
Blake on Blake, no problem. Blake.
like so deep, and he spent his entire like high school and college career being like super leftist hippie activist, and now he's a big time corporate lawyer.
Yeah.
He's like the weed king of Oklahoma.
Pretty much. Switch over to the man.
Yeah. He makes really good money.
Oh yeah.
But
Very, very good man.
what's kind of funny, so when the question came on the ballot.
All right, we got a decision. We got everybody? It's hilarious. I'm now the old person that is the last one in, apparently.
How old are you, Ben? Older than you, right?
33.
Oh, okay, I was wrong. I was willing to take that bullet.
Congratulations to both teams for making it to doubles. The National Debate Tournament. It is a 4-1 decision for the negative from Wake Forest.
Yeah, so I said it. I thought that the AF one, the choreosonics is the key to relations and not the resource or whatever the other R word they said. And that I kind of thought this debate came down to the office that they have on the K in terms of this distinction between horizontal and vertical that I thought y'all were behind on. But I was able to kind of just resolve that in terms of the top portion of the case page in terms of winning the choreosonics in terms of the music and about having about also being able to kind of access their ability to do this community work or to do this communist organizing. I thought that there were. I thought that the last two rebuttals could have been a little bit more developed in terms of what y'all were going for. That they could have made it like a little bit, you know, I guess easier to kind of be able to analyze what happened on the flow. But that's kind of how I end up shifting down the debate, kind of in the big picture in terms of what does the negative do, what does the AF do, and kind of lean towards the AF in terms of creating these this relationship through choreosonics. That I thought that they kind of had a good game on.
Is this anybody? Okay. My long and short of it is, I end up thinking that the performance in the 2AC of the party probably proves kind of the kind of horizontal nature of your party, and it problematizes my ability to kind of give the full weight to choreosonics as something that can build relations, because I think they're outframing you on what type of relations you're able to establish and build, and how those relationships can still be parasitic to black communities. The reason why that's important is because I think you kind of do two things that I don't know how to resolve, which is I do think they're right that you're kind of conceding their framing, which means that they get to challenge kind of the representations of choreosonics and what that could potentially mean. And I think their framing kind of, the party performance says that. The two impacts to that argument that I just don't really know what to deal with. The first one is kind of this folks politics that you create zones of survival where if you're bless you. Where your kind of performance is something that is not accessible to everyone, right? It's only accessible to certain people that are in that space. And those people in that space can be problematic because there's kind of no barrier and there's no kind of system in place that allow you to kind of check people. The kind of key part to this, I think, is this accountability argument they're making and the framing that kind of happens in the 2NR for the alternative that I think limits my ability to vote for what I think is your strongest argument in this debate, which is the characterization of kind of black body almost as this thing, like black folks as a thing that you can use in order to prove that, you know, you're kind of doing something, I guess, good. But the 2NR argument that I have that explains the alternative is that the alternative itself is not necessarily about theory, but it's about praxis, right? It's a question of kind of how you orient yourself towards violence that happens in the status quo that we cannot stop, right? There are some parts in the 2NR that I think could be cleaned up a little bit. I think there's an argument you make on the case page that's like communism is able to actually change and have a positive identification of blackness, but there's really no explanation of why that is true. It's kind of an assertion that exists. I think the other thing that you could do is kind of jettison this, like, most of the AF and just go for the relationality stuff. There's probably an affect argument you can go for and be like, George, Corey, and Ben, you all on affect principles, if since you was vibing with the 1AC, vote AF. They don't have a single reason why necessarily like black people have to necessarily work with their strategy, but they are kind of, since they're outframing you on a kind of more meta scale, I think you got to get more specific and just go for, listen, everybody black in here that was singing along the whole time when, I don't know what rendition that was, but I would say that rendition was probably slightly better than the normal one that happens in my opinion. I think it was very good. And that's a reason why I would vote for it. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. And there's no defense to that argument. There's no reason why I can't be like, yes, you're right. The organizational principles are necessarily bad, but I do believe the AF was good and I enjoyed it, and the affectual connection we had means that we can build a relationship. I think the second part that you need is probably some type of labor argument that kind of deals with what it means to actually hold everybody accountable that you come in contact with or that listens to your music. I also don't think you need to necessarily kick like this, you hold us culpable for stuff that's not our fault argument. I think you probably should like spend a little bit more time. I know it's defensive, but it at least helps kind of frame the affect argument for me. And I think if that happens, I can probably vote AF pretty comfortably on choreosonic created a relational, kind of had a relational affect on me. And I understand that it may not solve cap, but we vibing, so it don't really matter. Oh, the other world possibilities. That portion has to be in there, I think, more too. That needs to be the explanation of that. Is like cop pulls a gun on you. In that moment, you think of other possibilities of things that could exist. It's kind of not enough for me to really grasp onto as a reason why choreosonics kind of transcends the need for some type of solution to evictions and nuclear dumping. Oh my gosh, our nuclear plant's been built in your community. Yeah, that's all I got. Good job.
The issue I have is comparing the 2NR and the 2AR. I think that you all, and it's an issue for both teams, but I think it becomes more of an issue for you all, is you don't frame the debate small enough, like in your court. So you're answering still a large section of the arguments that they've presented in sort of shallow strokes, and it makes it hard for me to parse through like the internal links to some of the offense that you're trying to generate, as well as how your model sort of accesses this question of the permutation. So for example, one of the lasting phrases that I'm getting from your 2AR is that you check back against sort of the violent people who are allowed to the party because your process of vibes creates critical analysis on a subjective level. The issue is I don't have y'all parsing out what that means, how vibes permeate and stop at certain people but move through other people. And so at that point, I think that the performative characteristic aesthetic arguments that they're making about, well, look at the white people who, you know, were a part of this shit, the goofballs who were here and then they left, and what are they going to do with the politics, no accountability measure, et cetera, et cetera. I think if you had a stronger push on just like the vibes don't catch everybody, and even if they thought they caught it, they really didn't, then maybe that curtails that. But the short end of it is I don't think you all have a frame that removes some of the disads that they're going for against your model purely. So even if you win sort of the relationality component in terms of getting to reinvent or reinscribe some mode of intrinsic value for black people, they still have an argument that could produce bad black relations, i.e. the black bourgeoisie, and what they do with the shit, white people, how they use it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the lack of defense on the question of commodification coming out of the 2AR is like an issue there. You don't have anything to really place against it. And you're betting all your eggs on communism not being good because it's a representational politics that doesn't include black people relationality. I think they don't have to win that at the end of the debate. They just have to win a dissad to your model, which they like extend throughout the debate. So I think that requires that you go to framework first instead of this question of permutation, question of relationality, absolvency, essentially. I think you got to sit at where your offense is and really go there. And I also think that the culpability stuff has the potential to be offensive because you get to characterize that as what gatekeeping looks like in the context of parties versus the party. Yeah. Another issue, I don't think anyone defines what the fuck the party is. Like, y'all are like, we have a party. They're like, we have a party. What is it? Like, I still don't know what the party means for you all except for this nebulous term of democratic centralism. Doesn't really speak to the nature of the party, what organizes that democratic centralism, what the leadership structure looks like. Not that you have to go into the nitty-gritty details of that, but it's important to at least create that fabric. And on the flip side, y'all don't make the argument, it's just like, fuck that party. We're talking about a different party that has distinct features and things that are valuable to potentially lead to yours, but we don't have to win that our party is your party or leads to your party. We just have to win that our party is good. They have arguments about their party being good. That's not a reason to vote nay.
I thought the 2AR was super good because I thought it got back to the heart of the app, and the usage of the util arguments was what I wanted throughout the debate. And not just like with util, but using the app to explain the intrinsic value of the affective choreosonics. And there's kind of two different paths to get taken in the 2AC. One is that app and just the power and the intrinsic value of it. But there's tension with that and the logistics of just party organizing. And once you, I think, kind of meet them on the plane of who has a better organizational method logistically, that's not the path you want to go down. That you want to get back more to the intrinsic value of your performance, which is lines that you're telling me, but that is distinct, I think, from, you know, how do we get together, which plays into their arguments about gatekeeping, accountability, and just the logistical problems with horizontal organizing. And so what I want more is more of just, you know, my lack of ability to explain certain things is the power of the app, the intrinsic value of it. I think that is more of the place that you want to be sitting on, and would deny them the ability of getting some access to some of these things that I think are offense, like the kind of the ability. Well, that's what I would get back to. I think that there's some other like more specific things I could talk about how they're like kind of what I think controlling like the direction of the impact with maybe like the Amaro evidence, which I think is pretty good about giving me an explanatory clause for the impacts of the round with financialization and stuff. But I think that the heart of the matter is that you're getting away from your apps. And I can go into some of those like specifics, but for me it's just there's that strategic distinction that you're making the 2EC, and I think that you just played into their game a little bit too much.
I thought the 2AR strategy is the right one to focus in on the debate. The problem is that it's all very blanket terms, absent refutation of how they're spinning specific examples to explain away some of those impact arguments. So for example, the sort of trope of black suffering is one that is certainly true in parts, especially the way they frame like their fascism impact, but it's not at all responsive to things like the African People's Socialist Party in Florida, which they very explicitly describe as black people in a leadership structure of socialism that have constructed their own communities of power and kind of forced the white people to have their own sub-organization working for them. Or this example, the sort of contextual impact of the embodiment localism link of this Louisiana toxic plant, for example. Even the sort of in-round example of white people kind of getting up and leaving, you sort of, like during their speech, you're like, not the right white person. But then after that, it just sort of fades away into the ether. So they're able to spin all of the real material examples of performance or of political organizing, and whether or not it's vertical, horizontal, and accountability mechanisms, like this red balloon example, to generate why their form of organizing, even if imperfect in some situations, methodologically is a better option than the choreosonics that they see, which bites into several of their examples. I think being able to contest their examples, especially in the context of the culpability example or the sort of black people as information but not as leaders of the neg, I think if those kind of examples are weaponized in that context, then it mitigates the negative's ability to explain why they can begin to resolve larger forms of structural violence, or why it's even just a slightly better example. When it comes to these sort of abstract questions of political organizing, like vertical, horizontal mechanisms of accountability or whatever, those empirical examples are the easiest way to get judges to say, oh, this makes very clear sense to me, whereas I'm kind of left with this nebulous question on the other side, and that nebulous nature is what they're able to generate so much offense to in terms of how we confront, you know, the creep of fascism, the rise of neoliberalization of our politics, including in aesthetic attempts, right? So, I think definitely caught me off guard. But I think being able to spin back those examples in the context of the offense you're going for makes it much, much easier for me to say, well, even if I'm not certain that the vibes of the 1AC or the strategy of choreosonics is always good, it's clear that what they're doing is definitely bad in this debate. So even if there are questions left in my mind about what the app's method is capable of producing, I certainly know that their party is a bad one. And if, you know, the answer is question mark, I'd rather take question mark ass than shitty communism over there. Right?
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Great debate.
Nope. No, I think it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
debate. It's a good debate.
Thank you.
Nico Jacob 105.
Yeah, I think that.
Georgia RS 105.
Who's Georgia RS?
UNLV AW.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Liberty, the other UNLV team.
So we're gonna go see us tomorrow?
That was the
I wanna see. I'm down to watch. Are you just gonna leave me? You know me? The Carlo. Oh, like a movie, you know? Carlo.
Yeah.
And
I was gonna tell my kids to watch it.
I think so. They did.
They did.
You like?
It sucks when it's just like Corey was just like
Do y'all have cough drops?
No, I thought your debate was really good.
sucks.
Like,
Dean Netherfield.
Yeah, the Dean walked on the last
Oh, Nancy Cantor, I said her. Hey, great job. HB. Good luck, y'all.
Thank you so
good
much.
good debate.
Y'all got Emory nuts, right?
We do.
Good luck.
I've never heard of them.
Oh,
Yes.
We're gonna.
GS stands for James.
Nah.
Come on.
Emory, I don't want to do that. I'm not part of that.
Yes, they're dumb. Get it.
Derek, can you take this little bit?
I got some Nancy Cantor might have seen it. I sent her a link. I also sent a link to Dean. Only two more.
Dude, that's gonna be like,
Hey, what's the
shit you missed my class for?
No.
You did it for the fun.
I'm joking.
What are you talking about? She would totally love the conversation that was happening in this.
Yeah, she definitely would.
Yeah, I literally told him I stood around like, yo, y'all should work.
Yeah, like
the gatekeeper working is hard to do.
yeah. And it had like 4 different historical examples about why technical rationality is better. There was like a couple. I don't remember. No, you didn't do it. I'm proud of y'all. If there was a debate that we wanted to have as our goals today,
It was this. It was definitely this one.
like there's not.
I think that's the one. I'm trying to get out of this room.
I got the van parked like right next to.
What are we going to eat?
There's a buffet. There's like a reception with like who's this that?
Yo, David, keep this.
Wait, can I just get food and then?
Yeah, I put mine
Oh,
on
my
top.
heart, yeah. And no, you're getting an award. Everyone gets awards at the NDT.
You were at the NDT, cousin.
I'm good fuck.
I'm dying. Me too. Everyone on the team has a cold. Yeah, I have a cold now. I don't know.
Yeah, everybody has a cold.
Yeah, I have a strong. That's the only good thing.
I'm doing good. Get the fuck away from
I'm
me.
staying, but I'm playing my DS. Nigga, you can't escape.